people in person, and hopefully we'll get even more to do that next time I speak at the group. So I'm Kathi Kellenberger. I recently became a customer success engineer at Redgate. I've been there for almost 5 years. I was editor of Simple Talk for that time, and I've just recently joined customer success. And one of the things that, especially in St. Louis, that's really important is I'm a volunteer at LaunchCode. And the lady that is speaking in your next meeting, if you notice that, Sharon was one of my first LaunchCode students, and she had nothing to do with, she had nothing to do with data or databases, had never touched a database before, and went through LaunchCode, and now she's a DBA and speaking at the user group. And she also now teaches the class I used to teach. So I feel like that is a big win. And, you know, if you haven't heard about LaunchCode, go out and take a look. It's, you know, tell your company about it. It's very great. And we're just basically changing the face of tech in St. Louis, what it's doing. The most important thing to know about me is I'm a lifelong learner and teacher. I love learning new things. I picked up way too many hobbies during the pandemic, way too many. Especially cookie decorating. I'm kind of regretting that one now because that helped me gain my pandemic weight. They were so good. So anyway, I'll get started. So this is to me, a really fun session. And I kind of started with some pictures and just some things that I had ran across over time, different things that I ran into. And so I put this session together to kind of show the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. SQL Server in 2005, especially, that to me was pivotal for SQL Server. That's when the language changed a lot. We started getting things in the language like common table expressions and windowing functions, things like that. So a lot of the things that we might have tried to do back in the day, if they're a little tricky, oftentimes we were stuck with basically loops, cursors for a lot of things that were really tricky. And it's just surprising how much easier some of these things are if you know the latest T-SQL code. 2012 was another big year for T-SQL. There hasn't been another, as far as I'm concerned, there hasn't been another big T-SQL year since 2012, even though they've added little bits and pieces here and there. So 2005, 2012, really big. So and I understand it often seems a lot faster to get something done the way you know how to do it, right? I've been in that boat so many times. I know how to do this thing with a T-SQL script. It's going to take me a lot longer to figure out how to do it in PowerShell. You know, I haven't been a DBA for a dozen years. If I was, I'm sure I would be a PowerShell expert. But like in my job, I don't touch PowerShell that much. When I do need to touch it, I'm like, wait a minute, how do you do this? How do you declare a variable? How do you have an array? How do you do all these things? Same thing with T-SQL. Sometimes it seems easier to stick with what you know than to really pay attention or keep up with the latest and greatest. So the first problem I want to show you is called the stock market problem. And this is a really interesting one because it goes back to the late 2000s when I used to write, well, I had not written an article for Simple Talk, which eventually I became the editor of Simple Talk, right? But back in the day, the editor of Simple Talk, Tony Davis, reached out to me and said, we want you to write. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to write? And he said, well, we have these contests. Does anybody know Fill Factor? Have you heard of Fill Factor? SQL Server Central, he's a guy that used to work for Redgate. That's a fake name, obviously. But he came up with these contests. Basically, you would get a data set, and I don't even know if these articles are even out there anymore, but you give you a data set and a problem, and it would be a contest. Who could figure out the code that ran the fastest? And they'd submit this. And these guys, this is like the Ipsic bin gone level. The people that the people that are just so intelligent and just like they probably have T-SQL code in their veins, and they came up with these solutions, and it was very difficult to understand, very, very difficult. And so Redgate came to me and said, we know that you're good at explaining things to people, hard technical concepts. So we would like you to take a look at these contests and explain the winning solution, because we can't figure it out. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So this is 2008 or 9 that I did this. Okay. What ended up happening, I ended up coming up with my own Aunt Kathy solution to these problems that were almost as fast, like a split second. Like their solution ran in 300 milliseconds and mine ran in 500 milliseconds, but mine was easier to understand. But then after 2012, and we had all these new windowing functions, I went back and said, hey, wait a minute, I wonder how we can solve these problems now that we've got all these new things. And surprisingly, it was extremely easy and also ran fast. So that's this first one. So, oh, I'm telling you the wrong story. I'm going to switch to the subscription. The subscription problem is the slide I should have had up here. So the subscription problem was the one that is from that contest. Basically, you've got, for any given month, you've got people subscribe, people leave. Okay, people subscribe, people leave. For any given month, how many people are subscribed? And we're only going to look at the months. We're not going to look at days per se. If they leave on the last day of the month, then we're going to subtract them from that month. And this is what we should end up with. So we're going to get one row for each month, the number of people joined, the number of people left, and the current subscription. So another thing that Fill Factor did with this is he provided a cursor solution. And what you could do then is run that cursor solution against the data, and you had to match that answer with your wonderful code, So let's take a look at that. And do I not have, I do have it. I'm like, I gotta have this running. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I got statistics.io on. So the original problem had 10,000 rows in the table, and that cursor solution took minutes to run, okay? The winner took under a second. The thing is, that was a long time ago. 2009 does not seem like that long ago, but it was really a long time ago. And now I can't get the original problem to run slow, no matter what I tried. I could not get it to run slow. It's fast, no matter what I do, because I have this amazing laptop. We were not really doing multi-core, and I've got this laptop that's 32 gigs of RAM, and 4 core. That was better than the servers back then, right? So I changed the data to use 1,000,000 rows instead, and I use SQL data generator to create my data for me. So there's 1,000,000 rows in that table. So when you approach this problem, one thing you can think about is that we're going to not need it to count for every day. We need counts by month. So that's the first thing to think about when solving this problem. So what you can do is do a count like this. How many new registrations for each month? And the reason I'm going back to 1970, again, I had to cover a lot of area to make this run slow. I had to go back to 1970 to actually have a data set that it would work, but it would just run too fast. So I had to make it a challenge. So I could also notice that I'm doing these separately because I'm grouping by something different. In one, I'm grouping by the date join, in one, I'm grouping by the date left. So if I can just normalize those two things and just work with that data, it makes it much easier. Now I'm working with a much smaller number of rows. So that's really the first trick when you're doing a problem like this. I think the original solution, the cursor solution, looked at every row one at a time. So you got to start thinking in sets, even with a problem like this. So even with a problem like this, back in 2009, this would be one way to look at it. So here is a self join. So what I really need to do for every row, and there's some months that don't have a new registration, but there aren't any months that have counts. So every month has a new registration, at least one. Some months don't have cancellations. So we're going to need to do a left join on this. Okay, so the first thing I might try to do is a self join. And here I'll probably kill it before it completes. I've got the people joined, the people left, and then I'm going to combine that data in the outer query. And when I tried this at one time, and I know I've got an even newer laptop, probably since the last time I did this, I'm going to just kill it because it takes a long time to run, even though it does give the correct answer. Okay. So here I've got people join, people left, then I combine the data I have to use a left join, and then after that, I have to do some fancy stuff there, and it just takes forever. But that might be the way to run it, if you didn't have the windowing function. So here's one where I am creating a temp table of, let's see, this is the cursor solution. I'm going to insert into subscriptions, but I am just grabbing the months. I'm not looking at it row by row. And there's where I'm adding it up. There's where I'm closing the cursor. And here's where I'm running. I think this actually doesn't take too long. Yeah, so this is a cursor, which used to take like minutes back in 2009 on much less data. It's just the hardware we're throwing at things is so much better. So there we are getting the answer even quick. So the original winning solution, he created a temp table to hold each month and the number of people that joined and the number of people that left. He's inserting the data. He's doing a case here on how to do it. He's doing an unpivot. I never quite understood everything this guy did. So he's using an unpivot to populate that table. I kind of understood it back when I was approached on this problem, but then he does something that caused a lot of controversy. He did this thing called a Quirky update, where he is updating a variable. I don't even get this. He's updating a variable and using the variable to update it. And this caused a lot of controversy because this was a very popular topic on SQL Server Central back in the day when this first came out. And people were saying, you can't do that. You can't do that. And the guy said, I just did it. And it ran in less than a second. Let's see. And then once you have that temp table, then there's still a lot going on. Oh no. Let's see. I just have to, oh, he drops it before you have a chance to look at it. Or is it there? Let me see. Okay, so there's his solution. I did the end of the month and he did the beginning of the month. You know, that's the only difference between our solutions. I have a reason for doing the end of the month. And if we look at that, I don't have time. I just have statistics.io up here. So that was what this guy's solution was. And this Quirky update caused a big controversy. And they said, well, maybe this is an undocumented thing, you know, using a variable to update a variable. You know, this should not work. And so it does work. However, it's undocumented, but with all undocumented features, it may not work forever. Okay, so this was the solution. Is this the one? Yes, this is the modern solution. I don't have the Aunt Kathy solution that I came up with back then, but it involved using some temp tables and I don't remember, but this is the modern solution. I start with a common table expression and I get the new subscriptions and the cancellations. We've seen that before. We're going to aggregate that data down wherever we can up front. Then for each month, we're going to join new subscriptions, left join cancellations on date join, date left. We're normalizing the date again. And we are doing, so it's a running total basically that we're trying to get. We're doing sum over with a rows between unbounded preceding and current rows. Anybody not heard of rows between unbounded preceding and current row before? Has everybody heard of it? You haven't heard of it. So this is part of SQL Server 2012. If you check with me at the end or email me, I will send you some videos to where I explain this. You know, so this is a window functionality that was added in 2012. It will get you running totals. It'll get you moving aggregates like 3-month moving average, things like that. So I'm going to run it. This is mine. Nothing weird here. Pretty much above board since 2012. And it also runs instantly. You know, so this is amazing. And I really try to get these things to run slow and I just couldn't because the hardware is so good. I guess I could have gone with 1 billion rows and see what happened.
The hardware or the execution
plan? So let me turn execution plan on. The hardware is making a big difference because back in 2009, if you ran that cursor solution, it would have taken minutes, maybe 10 minutes on 10,000 rows. Now on 1 million rows, it's like a second or so. So the hardware is much better. SQL Server's better. And now even with the new solution, so the way I did it here, you know, I had the common table expressions, I joined the two, and then I need to do a running total, the new way to do a running total. You know, I could have left out, I could have just said sum over order by and left this out, but that would have killed the performance if I had left that rows between unbounded preceding and current row out. The execution plan is probably pretty messy. Oh, it looks very straight. It's only one table, I guess. Execution plan doesn't look too bad, but there's a lot going on there because I'm taking that table, I'm breaking it down into two pieces, putting it back together a different way, and then doing a running total. So, any other questions before I move on? No? Okay. I'm going to go back to the slides. Let's see, I don't need that one. I am going to go back to the slides and I'm going to talk about this one, which every one of these has got a story along with them. So I was working about 10 years ago for Pragmatic Works. And what they did is they would take your senior consultants and mentor the junior consultants. So everybody wanted me to be their mentor. You know, I had like 3 or 4 people, but one of them came to me one day and said, I don't know why this is not doing the whole screen. There we go. Kathy, I pull stock market data from the web every night and I load it into a table, and I want to be able to run a query that gives me the closing price, compares the closing price from one day to the next. Even though the open price is there, it doesn't always match the previous day's closing price because things can happen overnight. And he had to really, I wish I had a copy of the query that he had. He had like 7 nested joins to find the previous day. So I showed him what to do. A couple months later, I was working on an engagement in Columbia, South Carolina. I was there for a year and a half, every other week. It was actually turned out pretty nice because I already had some friends there and made even more friends since I was at that company for so long. The DBA, I was not a DBA, I was an ETL developer while I was there. The DBA came to me one day and said, Kathy, I scrape stock market data off the web every night and I load it into a SQL Server table, and I want to figure out how to compare a good performing way to compare the closing price from one day to the next. And I showed him. You may think I'm making this up, but it is 100% true. It's just so funny that just a few months apart, I got asked the same question, 2 totally different situations. So let me show you how that works. And this was already in 2012, 2013 is when this was. So the stock demo. So let me turn that on. I really wish I had that code that junior consultant showed me because it was just really funny. So what I've got here is 3 years worth of fake data. It's not real data. I made up the ticker symbols. I made up the prices. The dates are real dates, but I made up the rest, obviously. So I've got 999 symbols, almost 700,000 rows, okay? How would you approach this problem? My first thought is you've got to join the table on itself and then join the trade date to greater than the trade date. But this is not the answer because it ends up being, this will run, I'm going to kill it right away. This will end up being a Cartesian product because I'm going to get back, 1 row for every row in the other table that's less. So it's called well, this is really just a Cartesian product. I mean, it's because I'm not grabbing the top 1 that I need. Actually, I didn't tell you what this should look like. Let me show you really quick. This is what it should look like. Here's my row, and here's a row here. I'm grabbing this value from the previous row, and then I'm subtracting. That's what it should look like. Forgot to show you that. Okay, so this doesn't work because I need to grab top 1. But if I just add top 1 there, it just returns 1 row, not 1 for every. So I could create a temp table and a cursor. It says here, do not run during demo. So I'm not going to run it because I think it takes a long time. It may not anymore. I can let it run a little bit and then kill it. I forgot to let it run once I got here. Okay, I'm going to kill it and just see what it's populated so far. And it's got through 32 rows. I got 700,000 to go. Okay, it took that long, probably about 10 seconds just to process 32 rows. It's going to take a while. So I don't recommend that. Okay, apply. Apply was introduced in 2005. With apply, what I can do is start with that idea I had in that previous example where I'm comparing, the table to itself, and I'm using this less than. And here so basically what I'm doing is I'm saying for every row in the outer table, give me the top 1 that's less than that where the symbols match. Okay, I'm only going to run 4 symbols here. I've got almost 1,000 symbols. I'm only going to run 4 of them just to show you that it works. So it took 3 seconds to just run. You can see that it works to just run 4 of them. So even while this is a good solution, because basically what I'm doing is I've got a row, I need to find out what's in the row before. Before 2012, you had to do something like this, or you had to do a cursor. It was really difficult to do. Here's the best solution. Has anybody heard of the SQL function, window function called lag? Anybody hear of that? Almost, pardon me? In one of my articles? It's probably in many of my articles and probably many of my sessions. I talk about lag a lot. I've done a whole session just on lag. And 12. Yeah, so what it does is it pulls a value, one of the columns, from another row. And you can go backwards or you can go forwards. You can even specify a number of rows if you would like. So I'm going to run this. Remember, we've got 696,000 rows in this table. It may take a while to populate the grid. But it took 3 seconds to do the whole thing. 3 seconds to do the whole thing with lag. I love the look on your face.
Well, I'm stuck with outer apply in a lot of my situations.
Yeah.
But I've not seen the slowness that you're showing there. It's just blowing me away.
It depends on the situation.
Okay.
So the outer apply I'm doing there is I'm joining on the trade date and then I'm doing a less than. I think I'm doing a less than. So that's why. If you're not doing a less than, you're probably getting good. Yeah, outer apply is not, there's no, yeah, everybody's got a toolbox, and you just use whatever works. And this tool, this hammer is not going to work when I'm trying to clean the windows, right? Hopefully not. Oh, it broke. Why'd it break? I'm using the hammer correctly. Why'd the window break? Yeah, window's clean now. I see right through it. It's not there anymore. All right. So lag is really great if you need to get a row from a value from another row. 2012. So I haven't seen anybody on 2008 for a while, but I haven't seen anybody for a while if you think about it. I did go to SQL. I did go to SQL Bits in London in March, I think, March or end of February. I did go to that. That was the only other in-person event I've been to. And I almost didn't go to it. I almost did mine remotely, but then I was interested in this different job at Redgate, and the manager said, "Oh, when are you going to be in London?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can be there in 2 weeks." So that was, otherwise I would have just stayed home. I just didn't think it was worth it because it was just so much testing you had to do. You had to test before you went and test twice while you were there and test before you come back. And it was crazy, the amount of testing. All right, back to the slides. Let's see, where am I? I told you the subscription. I told you the stock. The next one. Okay, so here's one. Remember, whenever I showed you the subscription problem and I changed my months, I converted them all to the end of the month, where the original guy back in 2009 did the first of the month. So what he had to do was break the date apart, put it back together, basically. So I can't remember if around 2012 or 2016, I'm not really sure now. There's just been too many versions, somewhere around there. Microsoft introduced a bunch of things that the Aunt Kathy name is the easy functions. They are easy, and these functions are things that you might see in Excel, or you might see in .NET, or you might see in Access. And they got brought over, and I think the reasoning is that for migration projects that, you know, that might make things easier. Some of these functions are good to use because they perform well. Some of them do not scale whatsoever. They just are bad functions and they don't scale. If it's on a little bit of data, fine. But if you're scaling to millions of rows, no, bad. One of them is called the end of the month. Oops. It's called the end of the month, and let's see if I can find my SQL Server way over here. We're done with stock. So I was going to talk about a few of these. There's a bunch more. But end of month, so I've got one way to do this is take the month, split it apart. I think this is how the guy that did that original subscription problem, how he did it. Basically taking the month apart, putting it back together. So you can do it. This is against a relatively small, oh, this is only against 1,124. Thought it would be more than that. So Adam Mechanic, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He wrote Who is Active, that stored procedure. I don't know if it's part of SQL Server, but it's really popular. I actually had dinner with him. Oh, I did go to another in person in Boston. It wasn't really SQL Community, but he lives out there, and so I did have dinner with him. But anyway, it's a copy, not a copy of the sales from AdventureWorks, but similar to AdventureWorks. And I always like to do demos with that because it gives me a little bit more data to work with. So I also create different size copies of it. He's got a 32 million. I've got like 25% of that. So what I'm going to do here is just throw these into a temp table so we don't take time populating the grid for that many rows. This is a way you could do today or anytime. You know, we populated all those rows, and I'm just going to select the top 10 just to show you that it does work. If I got this state, I get this. You know, you know, that's just how you would do it. I'm going to drop clean buffers. I'm going to truncate that table. And I'm going to insert into it again, but this time I'm going to use the EO month function. Okay. We saw that one, it didn't take a long time to run. It was pretty fast on that large number of rows. I don't remember the exact number of minutes. I should have noted that. 3 seconds, which was probably comparable to the other time we ran it. And I cleared out the buffer, so I'm not cheating. And I'm also going to select the top 10 to show you that, you know, it did work. Do I want to run it on the entire table? Sure. Let's see what happens. This is the 32 million rows or 31 million rows. I got one more to do after that, and then we'll break for lunch. Okay, late lunch. Okay, so it took on 31 million rows, it took 12 seconds. It did not, that function did not slow things down. Okay, and it does work. Another one that I love so much is Concat. Concat, so here's middle name. If I just add these together, like I'm doing in the second column here, I get a lot of nulls. So concat is a way to concatenate strings, and it will take care of your nulls for you. It also takes care of your conversions for you. Okay, so if I wanted to concatenate business, if I wanted to come up with some special code for each customer, including their business entity ID, which is an integer, I could do it. I can't do it this, like that second column there, because I'll get an error, you know, conversion error. So it really, really great, and it does perform well. I'm going to skip that. That was just, and you can grab the code out of my GitHub, and I'll have a link.
I'm sure I've spun up my own. That's where I haven't had it, but when was that added, Copper?
I'm thinking 2012 or 2014. I lost track. Yeah, I'm going to skip those timing ones. There's one called format. I've always loved to use the convert because you can apply any date format you want. If you change this number, changes the format. I've always loved that. And that goes back, I don't know how, not a valid style. Okay, so let me, I don't remember the numbers offhand. Change it to 1, see what happens. There we go. So here it's got just the 2-digit instead of 4-digit. So it's pretty cool. There is one called format here. This guy does not scale unless they've improved it recently. This format, bad news, unless it's on a small number of rows. So that one's bad. There was another one. Yeah, I just got like how long it took to do it. Greater than 2 minutes. I don't have the example. Let me go back up to the top. I don't have all the examples here. There's one called string split that I'm not showing. I don't have that example where you can have a comma delimited, you can split it out into a table. The thing with that one is that it doesn't scale really well, but if you're just passing in, let's say a list of 20 items, it's going to be good enough. If you're passing in 1 million items, yeah, you might want to rethink your.
Recently, with the string split, they added
They add the ordinal, and I can't even remember what that is now.
it's just the ID versus the value.
The ID versus the value. Got it. So you get back, instead of just a value in that, you get back an ID as well. Yeah, I knew I played with that, but that was months ago. One more, if I can show you one more. The island and gaps problem. My names down here haven't been showing up. This is a photo I actually took in Hawaii. I took my entire family from my husband and me down, not my brothers and sisters, but you know, our kids and their kids. There were 11 of us, and it was for our anniversary, and I wanted to have do our vows on a black sand beach in Hawaii. Was a bucket list item. And I also wanted to use the Klingon vows. If anybody knows what I'm talking about there, look it up sometime. Dax and Worf's vows. It's beautiful. The ceremony is beautiful. However, at the end, the guests all come up and attack the couple with these bath sword things. We didn't do that piece, but it's the words are beautiful. So we did that. On the way back to the car, I'm holding my granddaughter's hand, and she's 10 now, and that was 4 years ago. So she was about 6, and she said, "Grandma, are you and Grandpa gonna have kids?" So that was pretty funny. So that's why I have to have this one. So really quick, islands and gaps is a problem that you might see in computer science, or maybe you have to do it in real life. Find the dates with no orders, or find the contiguous. And just really quick, I'm going to create the table. And we can see like there's a gap. 6 and 7 are in a gap. Here's an island, and so on. 12 is a gap. So I had never really tried to solve this, any other method, and I just, way back, way back, like 10 years ago, tried to figure out how I would do it. So what I used to do a lot of times is I used to just throw row numbers into things just to see if I could see a pattern. And if you look, you can kind of see that there's a pattern here. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and then all of a sudden, there's, you know, the difference between these is 0, and then all of a sudden the difference between them is 2. So I can use that difference to my advantage to find this. So the next step was to do the subtraction, and I'm going to call this the difference group. So every difference group is an island. And then I used row number, which has been around since 2005, which I was using row number, but by using row number, I've got this solved. So I'm grouping, start with row number, and then I'm grouping by this diff and find min and max. So just row number was the difference. So here's an island, here's an island, here's an island, and here's an island. Okay, so I'm going to stop so we can eat lunch. But I guess any questions, let me bring up. Yeah, right there. It's on the screen. I'll just leave it up during the lunch.
Gonna take a short break and test out LaunchCode.